Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Ford Hall Forum, and we're really glad you're here tonight. Thank you all for waiting in line. My name is Gordon O'Hara, and I'm a member of the Ford Hall Forum Board of Directors. And before we begin tonight's program, I want to just take a short moment to tell you a little bit about Ford Hall and encourage you to join the forum on the way out this evening. Tonight marks the end of a wonderful and very diverse spring season for the Ford Hall Forum. For those of you who are unfamiliar, and I know there's a lot of new faces out in the audience tonight, Ford Hall Forum is the oldest public affairs lecture series in the United States. Throughout the years, we've maintained two traditions to make our programs accessible to as many people as possible. First of all, every program, 15, 16, 20 a year, are always free. And second, all of our programs are open to every member of the public. Since 1908, we've inspired and presented hundreds of speakers with ideas and views that span the spectrum of politics, of religion, of living in America. After years of service to the community, the Forum is now recognized as a cultural landmark in Boston and lauded for its remarkable public affairs and educational programs. There's many schools that are with us here tonight, and we welcome you. You may now be asking yourself, or the person next to you, how can the Forum afford to present wonderful speakers like Ms. Walker without charge? And there's an easy answer to your question, other than the generosity of Ms. Walker, and that's membership. Your membership helps support the Forum, and it's only $25 for a full year. In return for your contribution, you receive preferred seating to all of our events, which for the people at the end of the line, they would be very happy about that. If you want to find out more about membership, there's a membership table. It'll be on your right-hand side as you head out. Do stop by, pick up one of our flyers, and be sure to look in the Boston Globe, the Boston Herald, for our upcoming fall season next year. With that said, and with your patience and great abundance, I'd like to present to you the moderator for this evening, the Honorable Vivian Beard.
Thank you, Gordon. Good evening, everyone. I'm Vivian Beard, and like Gordon O'Hara, I am a member of the Board of Directors of the Ford Hall Forum. I am delighted to have the privilege, the singular privilege, to serve as your moderator for what promises to be a remarkable program. We are honored to be able to present to you one of the nation's best-known authors, Alice Walker. By the size of the overflow crowd, it is clear that her reputation precedes her. We have many groups that have come to join us this evening, including students from public and private schools. And as we're assembled this evening, we expect that you're going to have a real treat. Now, Ms. Walker's writings have often addressed volatile issues, including racism, sexism, and domestic and ethnic violence, drawing these controversial and difficult topics into the arena of public discussion. One of the things that we're here tonight to do with the Ford Hall Forum. She is renowned as a poet, novelist, short story writer, and essayist. Her best-known work is The Color Purple, for which she received the Pulitzer Prize and the American Book Award for Fiction. Her critically... Yes. Her critically acclaimed bibliography includes such familiar titles as You Can't Keep a Good Woman Down, In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, The Temple of My Familiar, and her latest, Possessing the Secret of Joy. Her work has been featured in an abundance of publications, including Miss, Essence, Harper's, the New York Times Magazine, and her numerous awards include the Lillian Smith Award from the National Endowment of the Arts, the Rosenthal Award from the National Institute of Arts and Letters, a Radcliffe Institute Fellowship, and a Guggenheim Fellowship. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a big Boston welcome, regardless of where you're from, to our distinguished guest this evening, who has traveled from California to be with us for this program, Alice Walker.
And it's not easy to leave California in the spring. I would like to say how happy I am to be here, and also I would like to say to my family that I'm really happy that you're here. I don't know where you're seated, so I can't quite spot you. Where are you anyway? And in fact, did you make it? Maybe not. Oh yes, okay, hi. I would also like to acknowledge a very deeply loved teacher who is here tonight, a person of unsurpassed wisdom, beauty, courage, grace, wit, and height, Howard Zinn. I saw on the flyer that you all received that I am supposed to survey the society and talk about the burning issues of the day. What I have learned in my fifth almost decade is that I can't survey the society really in its entirety, and besides, I don't want to. And because a lot of it, as you know, is really not worth the effort. But what I can do is pay attention to maybe one or two burning issues. And I wanted to share with you what I consider the burning issues that have occupied a lot of my time in the last couple of years, maybe the last 3 years. Some of you know that Possessing the Secret of Joy is about a woman who was genitally mutilated, and it's about her psychological destruction and her effort to become a whole person again. I'm going to read some of that to you, but I also later, when we talk, would like to tell you about what I've been doing since this book. I just came back from Africa, where I spent 5 weeks making a film, not about the book, but about the women and the children involved and the people of the various villages. And this turned out to be really very interesting because before I wrote the book, I didn't interview anybody. It's a work of the imagination using, I read a lot of different sources, a lot of different books. And as you know also probably by now, there are a number of writers besides myself who have done incredibly brave and consistent and long-term work on this issue. There is Fran Hoskin, for instance, who has done just an incredible job in keeping the issue of female genital mutilation before us as something that we can collectively work on. So I would like to talk about this with you later if you have questions. We were an all-women crew in Africa, completely diverse. I think it was a site that was quite rare for the continent to have women from everywhere coming to make this film. In addition, I would like very much the other burning issue that I would like to discuss with you is the embargo that is now has been in place against Cuba for the last 31 years, and which has recently been tightened by the Torricelli Act, so that people are really punished for trading with Cuba. And this is something that is so, I was just there 10 days ago in Havana, and I would like to tell you, what it looked like to me and what we can maybe think about doing so that people who really deserve support can have support at a time when they really need it. So I'm going to read a section from this book which is comparable to Genesis. Now this is the Dogon. The Dogon are people who live in Mali. And this is a kind of Genesis story, a myth, just as Genesis is a myth, and which does to women and to men what Genesis does to women and to men, in a sense. Because, as you will see, in order to put in place these incredibly cruel, oppressive systems, people do create myths which validate the behavior that they then can carry on indefinitely. I mean, these people, the Dogon, have been doing genital mutilation for maybe 6,000 years. So we're talking about an assault on the psyche and on the body of children and women for many, 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 many generations. And so we're talking about something that, has the force of this kind of mythology behind it. And this is the actual myth. The god Amma, it appeared, took a lump of clay, squeezed it in his hand, and flung it from him, as he had done with the stars. The clay spread and fell to the north, which is the top, and from there stretched out to the south, which is the bottom of the world, although the whole movement was horizontal. The earth lies flat, but the north is at the top. It extends east and west with separate members like a fetus in the womb. It is a body, that is to say, a thing with members branching out from a central mass. This body, lying flat, face upwards, in a line from north to south, is feminine. Its sexual organ is an anthill, and its clitoris a termite hill. Amma, being lonely and desirous of intercourse with this creature, approached it. That was the occasion of the first breach of the order of the universe. At God's approach, the termite hill rose up, barring the passage and displaying its masculinity. It was as strong as the organ of the stranger, and intercourse could not take place. But God is all-powerful. He cut down the termite hill and had intercourse with the excised earth. But the original incident was destined to affect the course of things forever. Now, the person who is reading this is named Pierre, and he is the son of the lover of the woman who has very much lost herself because she was genitally mutilated. But part of his responsibility, he has felt as an educated person is to find out why she has suffered so grievously. And so he does, as an anthropologist. In fact, he went to Harvard, and he went to Berkeley. As Pierre reads, I study his face, seeking signs of Adam, that's her husband, signs of Lisette, that's her husband's lover. He seems a completely blended person, and as such, new. In him, black has disappeared, so has white. His eyes are a dark, light-filled brown. His forehead is high and tan, his nose broad, a little flat. He has told me he likes men as well as he likes women, which seems only natural, he says, since he is the offspring of two sexes as well as of two races. No one is surprised he is biracial. Why should they be surprised he is bisexual? This is an explanation I have never heard and cannot entirely grasp. It seems too logical for my brain. His brother sits across from him as he reads, sunk in admiration. This is a brother who was brain damaged because often when genitally mutilated women give birth, and if they have been infibulated, it is very, very difficult for the baby to come out of the body of the woman without a lot of tearing. So that's one of the reasons women have to be cut, and if there's no one there who knows how to do it, and doctors in this country generally don't know how to do it, there is a big chance that the child will be injured mentally. His brother sits across from him as he reads, sunk in admiration. They have stolen many hours to be together, roaming the Berkeley campus and the city streets, happy to have found each in the other his own best friend. Now he stops reading suddenly and looks at me. This is from a book by a French anthropologist, Marcel Griol, he says, turning it so I can see its orange cover and read its title, Conversations with Ogot Metelli. I am under the influence of a new, mild, and quite pleasant drug. It is as if I've smoked marijuana. I have not grasped the meaning of the passage, which Pierre has read to me so earnestly. Nor do I completely comprehend how it is he is sitting in my living room reading to me from this strange book. Have I stopped hating him? I gaze at Benny, who looks so happy, and then down into my lap. My eyes sting the way they do when I'm drugged. Closing them brings relief. Pierre is reading as if I am listening. God had further intercourse with his earth wife, and this time without mishaps of any kind, the excision of the offending member having removed the cause of the former disorder. I feel him stop, rustle the pages, and look over at me. I am awake, I say. Indeed, I am listening. However, as he resumes reading, the words on touching my ear bounce back into his mouth as if they're made of India rubber. This is a distracting sight, and I look at Benny to see if he has noticed it. He hasn't. He sits enraptured, his notepad on his lap. Who taught him to write, I ask myself, if he can never remember anything? The spirit drew two outlines on the ground, one on top of the other, one male and the other female. The man stretched himself out on these two shadows of himself and took both of them for his own. The same thing was done for the woman. Thus it came about that each human being from the first was endowed with two souls of different sex, or rather with two principles corresponding to two distinct persons. In the man, the female soul was located in the prepuce. In the woman, the male soul was in the clitoris. Here I looked up. Pierre continued. Man's life was not capable of supporting both beings. Each person would have to merge himself in the sex for which he appeared to be best fitted. So, said Pierre, closing the book, but keeping his finger between its pages, The man is circumcised to rid him of his femininity. The woman is excised to rid her of her masculinity. In other words, he said, leaning forward in his chair, a very long time ago, men found it necessary to permanently lock people in the category of their obvious sex, even while recognizing sexual duality as a given of nature. How long ago was this? I asked, my focus somewhat blurred. Pierre shrugged, and I fancied I saw his mother's body in the fluid ripple of his shoulders. Even Cleopatra was circumcised, he says. Nefertiti also. But some people think the people in this book, the Dogon, are from a civilization even older than theirs, and that this civilization spread northward from Central Africa upward to ancient Egypt and the Mediterranean. He paused, musing. My mother used to say, genital mutilation, which predates all the major religions, was a kind of foot binding. After he leaves the house to accompany Benny to a basketball game, I am left with the book, whose pages he has thoughtfully marked, and with the puzzle of his last comment. Suddenly, I see his mother, Lisette, very clearly. She is sitting by a window in front of which there is a desk. She is thinking of me as she looks into a thick brown book in front of her, and her white brow is puckered in a frown. She is gazing at a drawing of a tiny, putrid Chinese woman's foot, and reading the notation that says the rotten smell was an aphrodisiac for the man, who liked to hold both small feet helpless in his large hand, raising them to his nose as he prepared to ravish the woman who could not run away. This immobility most satisfying to his lust. The pain of her hobbling attempts to escape, pure incentive to relish the chase. His mother has been conjured by the odd, un-American movement of Pierre's shoulders as much as by his words. Why, I wonder, do we assume people who think deeply about us ever die? As I open the book, my eye falls on a passage Pierre had not read. The man then had intercourse with the woman, who later bore the first 2 children of a series of 8, who were to become the ancestors of the Dogon people. In the moment of birth, the pain of parturition was concentrated in the woman's clitoris, which was excised by an invisible hand, detached itself and left her, and was changed into the form of a scorpion. The pouch and the sting symbolized the organ. The venom was the water and the blood of the pain. I read the passage over again, my eye always stopped by the words, an invisible hand. Even so long ago, God deserted woman, staying by her just long enough to illustrate to man the cutting to be done. And what if pain wasn't what she felt at the moment of parturition? After all, pain was what I felt having given birth, and I did not have a clitoris for it to be concentrated in. I read further. The dual soul is a danger. A man should be male, and a woman female. Circumcision and excision are the remedy. But who could bear to think of this for long? I closed the book, wandered unsteadily about the room, flopped heavily onto the couch, and lost myself in a rerun of Hee Haw on TV. The next section, I want to read, it takes place in the prison where Tashi is about to be killed in an African country that I made up. She is surrounded by her family and her friends who have come to stand beside her. But what is also happening is that they are trying to help her remember why she had this nightmare that she's always had for practically forever, of being captured in a dark tower and not being able to get out and not being able to escape. So here they all are, and this is the night before she is executed. She will be executed on a soccer field in this country. This is a country that unfortunately has many counterparts in real life. Many African people have died on soccer fields. Many African people have been executed by leaders who are really more murderous than one would like. Tashi. Crowded into the small white chapel on the top floor of the prison are Adam, Olivia, Benny, Pierre, Ray, and Mbati. Ray has flown in for the execution, though she denies it. "It is not your death that is so fascinating," she says bluntly. "It is still your life with which I am concerned. Besides," she says saucily, hands on her hips, "you're not dead yet." Indeed, I think, I am not. But neither would I say I am fully alive. "Considering the deterioration of the rest of the prison," says Mbati, "it is odd that the chapel is still intact." "That's because no one uses it," says Adam, fingering the dusty, unopened Bible, whose gilt-edged pages have been gnawed by moths. "It is even cool here in the evenings. The windows are large, and nothing, not even shutters, blocks the breeze. There are no bars, presumably because it is too high to jump. Since the trial, Olivia has volunteered to work mornings downstairs on the aids floor. Adam, Benny, and Pierre have rented a Jeep and explored the countryside. "We filmed everything," says Benny, "and now we want you to see it." Adam starts the projector. At first there are slides, pictures of the Northern Territory and its petroglyphs and faded paintings of celebrations and hunts. But then there is a film. I know they are trying to prepare me for it because Olivia is suddenly handing me a glass of water and Adam is holding my hand. Pierre, who has said he wants to be the first anthropologist to empower and not further endanger his subjects, now stands quietly beside the machine. At first I think they are showing me a human settlement, a village. The shapes are the same. Huts with umbrella-shaped tops, huts like mushrooms. But then there's a close-up of the huts and a man's feet and legs rising above them. I recognize Adam's hiking boots. Then, when the picture is opened up, I see that the settlement is vast, but the huts are tiny, only 3 to 6 inches high. "Ha," says Adam, squeezing my hand. "Fooled you." "I thought it was a village," I say, turning to Olivia and Mbati. "Didn't you?" Mbati smiles. Olivia says, "Yes, I did, though I did wonder about that short, lumpy hut that leaned so drastically to the left." "But what is," I start to say, but I'm choked by the desperate surge of my heart as it makes a sudden attempt to leave my chest. "It's okay," says Adam. "You are not alone. We are all here with you." "You're not alone. You're not," I hear from Ray. Her perky voice seems to come to me from another age. Women who are not gelded have a different sound, I think. They can sound perky. A gelded woman cannot. I think this in a flash, my mind in despairing flight from the sight of a tall, rough, earth-colored column on the screen before me. Benny, dwarfed beside it, smiling uncertainly into the camera. Pierre clears his throat. "It is my belief," he says, after stopping the projector on the image before us, "that human beings in Africa, because of the heat and humidity, imitated the termite when they looked about for housing that would be comfortable, long-lasting, and easily built. That is why many traditional African houses, even today, and all adobe houses anywhere, resemble those of termites. It was termites who taught early humans about natural air conditioning, with their long vaulted passageways and great domed storage rooms. Termite houses, like mosques, are always cool, no matter what the outside temperature. Termite houses are made from the earth itself, from clay, the cheapest and most plentiful substance around. Now, Pierre actually has a French accent, which from time to time I get close to. So if you hear a curious change, that's what it is. What surprises me is that I can hear Pierre and even understand what he is saying. It is true my heart leapt painfully once, but now it is beating normally. I glance around the room at the faces gathered about me. They are each as intent as my own. I look at Pierre and I think, yes, it is a good thing that we train our children to help us, we who need so much help. I send a flash of gratitude to those schools I've never set foot in, Berkeley and Harvard. If I should live, I think, I would visit them as shrines. I believe, he continues, that over time there was a strong identification with the termite, which Africans call white ant, even though it bears little resemblance to an ant. Unlike the ant and most other insects, the termite has kept a place for males in its society. There is a queen, but also a king. Perhaps this is why also the people felt an affinity for it. White ants, as you know, are eaten by the people in the country who prefer them fried. And in the city too, if they could get them, says Olivia. She glances sharply at Mbati. It is disgusting to see how the youth are gorging on potato chips. Adam laughs. Mbati pushes her bag of fry-o potato chips deep in her string bag. Their religious symbology became completely reflective of termite behavior, continues Pierre. Their gratitude for having been taught so much by the termite was great. And of course, the termite was so delicious, says Ray. The termites, continues Pierre, would have taught them to make pots, which would have led inevitably to the notion that the first human beings were themselves fashioned out of clay, and that something or someone so fashioned them. But, says Pierre, running slender brown fingers through his sun-bleached dark curls, not to run on and on about this. This, Madame Johnson, is your dark tower. You are the queen who loses her wings. It is you lying in the dark with millions of worker termites who are busy, by the way, maintaining mushroom farms from which they feed you, buzzing about. You being stuffed with food at one end, a boring diet of mushrooms, and having your eggs, millions of them, constantly removed at the other. You who are the greasy, you who are fat, greasy, the color, as you have said, of tobacco spit, only a tube through which generations of visionless offspring pass, their blindness perhaps made up for by their incessant, if mindless, activity, which never stops day or night. You who endure all this, only at the end to die and be devoured by those to whom you have given birth. Ah, says Olivia, the termite as Christ. But how did I know this? I asked my little band of intent faces. No one told me. We think it was told you in code somehow, says Ray. Not told you directly that you, as a woman, were expected to reproduce as helplessly and inertly as a white ant. But in a culture in which it is mandatory that every single female be systematically desexed, there would have to be some coded mythological reason given for it, used secretly among the village elders. Otherwise, they'd soon not know what they were talking about. Even today, there are villages where an uncircumcised woman is not permitted to live. The chiefs enforce this. On the other hand, circumcision is a taboo that is never discussed. How then do the chiefs know to keep it going? How is it talked about? My mind is blank. Surely no one ever told me anything except that this thing Melissa did to me expressed my pride in my people, and that without it no man would marry me. Perhaps, says Ray, you had a nursery rhyme when you were small, as innocuous as Pita, Pita, pumpkin eater, had a wife and could not keep her, put her in a pumpkin shell, and there he kept her very well. What? Asked Benny, puzzled. It is about keeping a woman pregnant, says Pierre, stretching out his arms and curving them into a pumpkin shape, enslaved by her own body. Oh, says Benny, appalled. We know from Griot's work that among the Dogon, it was precisely the elders who were the guardians of the knowledge of the beginning of man. The creation itself began with mutilation and rape. I wonder if you remember our little lesson from Griot's book, Madame Johnson, Pierre says, looking at me. Much to my surprise, I do remember it. God wanted to have intercourse with the woman, I say, and the woman fought him. Her clitoris was a termite hill, rising up and barring his way. Good, says Pierre. Oh my God, says Ray, I know this sounds ridiculous, but the erect clitoris sort of resembles a little termite hill or house. Well, says Pierre, pointing to the giant one on the screen beside which Benny is standing, one like that clearly resembles a phallus. When the clitoris rose, I continue, God thought it looked masculine. Since it was masculine for a clitoris to rise, God could be excused for cutting it down, which he did. Then I said, God fucked the hole that was left. Of course I remember, I say to Pierre, that Griot said God had intercourse. It is I who say God fucked. And this is how people who mutilate little girls see the beginning of life, groans Olivia, dropping her head into her hands. Religion is an elaborate excuse for what man has done to women and to the earth, says Ray bitterly. But there were other religions, I say, thinking of the little figure blissfully loving herself. This is a little figure of a goddess that she has in her possession. Pierre shrugs. They were destroyed. Your little smiling goddess was destroyed. I turn to Mbati. Her lovely face is filled with horror. Nobody knows this story, she says. I am convinced. Which means, she says, visibly angry, nobody even knows why they do this thing. I certainly never had any idea why it was done to me. If my sex organs were unclean, why was I born with them? I asked my mother this once, before I was circumcised. She just said everyone knew a woman's vulva to be dirty and to need to be removed. That was all there was to it. No termites, no white ants, no structural similarities between genitals and insect dwellings were discussed. And who would not laugh at the notion that a clitoris, like a penis, can rise? Olivia asked if I am hungry or would like more water to drink. I am not sure. The sight of Mbati's anger has split me in two. Only a part of me is sitting in the midst of my family and friends. Another part is watching myself as a small child bring a tray of food and water to the elders of the village. They sit beside a baobab tree and gaze wisely out over the plain. The heat is intense but does not bother me. The earth is red, there are flies. Because I am small, they do not completely stop their talk. Number 1, what is a man? All, Number 2, a man is blind. All, Number 3, he has an eye. All, Number 4, but it cannot see. Number 1, man is God's cock. Number 2, it scratches the furrow. Number 3, it drops the seed. Number 4, but its offspring, all the crop. Number 1, excrement. Number 2, it cannot identify. Number 3, God's blind cock produces God's blind eggs. Number 4, is an egg not blind? Number 1, it is so. Number 2, the Tsunga's stitch helps the cock to know his crop, all, which after all belongs to God. Number 3, that is why it is said. Number 4, the Tsunga, though herself a woman, number 1, helps God. All, is it not so? All, it is so. All, woman is queen. Number 1, she is queen. Number 2, God has given her to us. Number 3, we are thankful to God for all his gifts. They do not, however, thank the child for bringing the food or send thanks to her mother for preparing it. Number 4, since God has given her to us, we must treat her well. Number 1, we must feed her so that she will stay plump. Number 2, even her excrement will be plump. They laugh. Number 3, if left to herself, the queen would fly. Number 2, true. Number 3, and then where would we be? Number 4, but God is merciful. Number 1, he clips her wings. Number 2, she is inert. Number 3, and even her excrement is sweet. Laughter. Number 4, because she is queen. Number 1, and we are only workers. Number 2, blind, it is true, but that is God's will. Number 3, did he not make us so? Number 4, true. Number 1, and did he not put the queen's body there to make our offspring? Number 2, and to be our food. Number 3, it cannot be denied. Number 4, and when she rose up, all, ha. Number 3, rose up indeed. Number 4, as a man would. Number 1, she did not see God's acts. Number 2, no, she was blind like us then. She did not see it. Number 3, God struck the blow that made her queen. Number 4, beautiful enough for him to fuck. Number 1, God liked it fighting. Laughter. Number 2, God liked it tight. Number 3, God liked to remember what he had done and how it felt before it got loose. Number 4, God is wise. That is why he created the Tsunga, all, with her sharpened stone and bag of thorns. Number 1, with her needle and thread. Number 2, because he liked it tight. Number 3, God likes to feel big. Number 4, what man does not? Laughter. Number 1, let us eat this food and drink to the queen who is beautiful and whose body has been given us to be our sustenance forever. Laughter and the noisy eating of food. The small child that I was is not noticed at all. She could have been a fly or an ant. I do not particularly notice them either. They've always been there underneath the baobab tree, gray-bearded, old, dressed in thick, dark robes against the sun, their wise old heads rapt and their eyes mirroring the timeless vacancy of the landscape around them. Gazing at them now from the safety of the prison chapel, from the safety of my impending death, I can see they are shells, empty of life. It is they who are being stuffed with food while nothing but oppressive verbal diarrhea comes out. The child, taught to respect these elders above all others, could not have recognized this. The old men discussing her and all the females of the village did not care that she heard them. They knew she would not be able to figure out what they were talking about. They were discussing her, determining her life, and at the time she did not, could not know. And yet, there in her unconscious had remained the Termite Hill, and herself trapped deep inside it, heavy, wingless, and inert, the queen of the dark tower. From my seat in the chapel, Adam's hand still in mine, I glance down at the feet of the child as she leaves the old men, belching in contentment, sitting in the dust. Idly, she kicks a stone. There is grace in her aim and no hesitation in her thrust. You have questions?
I'd like to thank Alice Walker for sharing her views and to thank her for the opportunity to hear her read from her latest book, Possessing the Secret of Joy. At this point in the program, we will take questions in the Ford Hall Forum tradition. It's time to hear you express your thoughts. There are 2 microphones at the front of both aisles, and we'll take a few questions from those who would be interested in lining up and speaking. I'm going to ask that if you have questions, that they be brief so that we can get as many questions from the audience as possible this evening.
I would just like to know, the passages that you read seem to suggest something deviant about male sexuality and seems to almost make women seem passive and almost willing in that respect. And why is that always a theme or a repetitive theme in your work?
Well, it has something to do with being a woman. And you might also notice in my work that I take a critical view of white society sometimes too. That gets repeated because that is also a reality. It's very difficult actually to live in the world and to know that children like, is this your daughter you're holding? Yeah.
Your opinion?
I get your drift. I think, though, that in this particular instance, you know, it may not affect you this way, but do you realize that there are 100 million women and children alive now who have been genitally mutilated, and what this means to them in terms of their health, their psychological well-being, and the health of their various countries? Because it is as if, you know, many of these countries and cultures, it's as if they're trying to progress with one half of them sick, you know. Because when you do this to women, you know, the women are often sick for life, and they have health problems that continue until they die. They have psychological problems that, you know, they need a lot of help with. Now, a different kind of writer from me could perhaps know about this and ignore it and write about something else. And I have, of course, written about other things, but this is very serious to me. Especially, it happens in Africa, the Middle East, Asia. It's also beginning to happen a lot in the West, in Paris, in London, in New York, in Washington, D.C. There are 10,000 children in this country who are at risk for this, genital mutilation. On the continent of Africa, it is especially necessary for us to be aware because of the way disease spreads because of genital mutilation. So we have to think of it as a health concern. I mean, it may not bother you that within the next, say, 5 generations, there could be very few black people in Africa. But it really bothers me a lot because I really want, you know, people there to be healthy, and I want them to last a long time. But one of the reasons, for instance, in Africa, that AIDS affects heterosexuals and children as much as it affects men is because of genital mutilation. A Tasunga, a circumciser, can circumcise, say, 20 girls with the same instrument without washing it. This, you know, whenever there is intercourse, whenever there is childbirth, there is incredible tearing of the flesh and opportunity for infection. So this is one of the reasons AIDS has spread so greatly in Africa. So, it's not just that I'm out to, just repeat and repeat and repeat any particular theme. It's just that I really do love our people. They're really beautiful. But they have to, I want them to be healthy, And I know, like you, they get really tired of me. And I know, that also, this is not the first time I have encountered these same things. When I went back to Africa, I had the feeling that they thought maybe 200 years ago that they had gotten rid of me, but no. And they never will, So they just have to get used to it.
Hello.
You may ask a question.
I'm wondering if Possessing the Secret of Joy has been read by women and men in different countries in Africa, and what kind of reception it's gotten there?
Well, it's been read more in African communities outside of Africa because it has not yet been translated into French, which a lot of Africans speak in Africa. There doesn't seem to be much of a chance to have it translated into Wolof, or Mandinka, and that's one of the reasons I felt that a film would be very useful, because the people don't tend to read anyway. I mean, a lot of people that I would like to reach about this really don't read at all. I mean, we went to many villages, and there were no books. Sometimes you would see, in a larger community, somebody would have a copy of the Quran, but that was basically it. And they all really thought that this practice was said to be done. I mean, that the Quran sanctioned this practice, and of course it doesn't. So I think that, for a writer like me, I come from a background where I know people don't read, all the time. They don't read a lot. So I have to be really conscious of going other ways, I had this dream when I was making this documentary in February and March that, I would get it done and then I would take it back to all the villages. But that won't really work because there's no way of showing it, actually. I mean, unless we come up with some kind of movie mobile, which is, I guess, maybe possible. So I think instead we'll have to take it to universities and have students look at it. But in communities outside, African communities outside of Africa, people, yes, indeed, women and men are reading it. And there have been many wonderful demonstrations by African women in London, because just recently, a few months ago, there was an African woman who proposed legalizing it in Britain. They had outlawed it in Britain, and she wanted to legalize it. And this was just, it's unbelievable, really. But there are many African women and men who know that this is detrimental to their progress and their health and happiness, and it's no mystery, really. I mean, it has been a taboo for so many centuries that in that sense it is a mystery. People just, they've been taught that it helps you, that it makes you healthy. They haven't been taught that it makes you sick. But once you understand, once people start to ask, well, what are they cutting away and what are the consequences? Then, and do you want this to happen to your children? I mean, do you really? People have a chance to, to think about it in a new way. How many of you know what I'm talking about? Great. Well, for those of you who don't know, I'll just be real brief. Genital mutilation is some people like to claim that it's their culture, but really it's torture. And what it is that traditionally, in order to prepare a young woman for marriage, you would remove her clitoris or her inner labia, her clitoris or inner labia, part of her outer labia, and in many countries they take it a step further and do what is called infibulation, which is then to sew her up so that there's just a very small opening left through which she has to, have menstruation and have her child, and so that with each birth she has to be opened and closed, and if there's nobody around to do that, she dies, or the child dies. It's very, I learned about this 20 years ago when I was in Kenya, and it was just so, it really was beyond my ability to grasp. And I've struggled with trying to figure out a way to make it graspable so that people can understand that, there is a difference between culture and child abuse. Especially when you can see today, for instance, in the old days, usually they did this around the age of 13, 12, 11. Now, there was a case in Paris 2 months ago where a mother from Mali was approached by a circumciser in the park who offered to circumcise her 2 daughters. And they were infants, and she let her do this, and they hemorrhaged almost to death. And the mother has been charged, and this is one of the first cases where, a Western country has stood up and said, well, maybe that's your culture, but, you don't do it in France. You cannot torture a child here. And so that's what it is. And the reason it's coming to the West, of course, is because, people who come from cultures where it's done and they settle here, it's just part of, of what they have always done. And so there's a real effort among African women in particular to try to educate people away from what is called, harmful traditional practices. I'm sorry to take so long.
No problem.
Okay.
I just wanted to comment on a line from your book where you say, if you lie to yourself about your pain, you will be killed by those who will claim you enjoy it. Mm-hmm. And one of my concerns is what happens here in this country that is not at all what is going on in Africa, but sort of a ripple of the same thing around childbirth practices. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to know if you had read Mary Daly's book, Gynecology, where she talks about foot binding, and she draws a comparison to modern obstetrical practices.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And if you would care to comment on episiotomies as they relate to keeping a woman tight and
right.
clean, mm-hmm. and what we do with male children, which is to still circumcise them without anesthesia most
right.
of the times.
Exactly. No, I think that, people hurt you, and that's all very true. It's hysterectomies that women don't need, episiotomies that are unnecessary, the hacking away at a woman's body, the reshaping of breasts, there's just the constant emphasis given to all of us that somehow, as women, how we are is not right. And so in the West, all over the globe, it's the same. Your feet are too big, your breasts are too small, your hips are not whatever, and on and on and on. And so women are encouraged to be very self-destructive. And as this woman here was saying, the women seem so passive. In many cases, that's very true, because they face a constant bombardment. In our culture, for instance, just think of how you would feel if you were a black child. For those of you who are not a black child. And you were just constantly, I want you to go home and watch I don't watch television, but I want you to go home and watch television. I watch it 2 hours a week. But you go home and watch television and pretend that you are a 3-year-old black child and see how you feel, with this constant bombarding of images of what the ideal person is supposed to look like, and be like. And it is the genocide of the mind. And so this is it's the same. It's the same kind of thing. Because in these mutilating cultures, the children are taught that if you, in fact, have an intact vulva, you are a monster. You are a monster. And when you, no longer have anything, then you are beautiful because you are clean, Okay?
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to end the evening because we go until 8:30 and then we have to stop the program. So
I know it seems that way. It's always that way when you're having a good time.
Thank
But I'd
you
like
very
you to
much.
join me in thanking Alice Walker.